Ethical Consumerism Part 2. Let's wait till I'm sure I'm live. And by the way, guess what? There is not a door back there. It was having plastic sheeting, but eventually the doors will come. Meanwhile, you're seeing all that blue tape where there was plastic sheeting that gave up the ghost. But it's pretty outside, so I don't mind. And it's hot outside, so I certainly don't mind the breeze. I just need to remember to put the plastic sheeting back up before I go to bed tonight. Ethical consumerism. Where do I get my plastic sheeting? One of the things that we need to really talk about and really confront is the idea, like I said in an essay that I wrote about a year ago, that you will find right underneath the ethical consumerism post that I did on the 17th a couple of days ago, is the fact that we need to tell the truth about how we live our lives in terms of what we buy. That pop up just came back about too low FPS, but you know what? I'm going to completely ignore it. Um, it's going to kill me. You know that I want to do something about it, but I can't. So we're just going to do our best to not pay attention, even though my heart stops and I'm not sure that people can see me when that thing pops up. But I did the other one, the ethical consumerism part one, and it did show up. So we're just going to take this one on faith. So when we're talking about ethical consumerism, we have to remember that no, it is impossible to be a completely ethical consumer in this society, particularly. We are going to start doing the good place. And one of the things about the good place is it goes into the seasons. And I don't want to give too much away if you have not seen the good place. So I'm going to be very circumspect in what I talk about. But when we're talking about applied ethics, not just applied relational ethics, but applied ethics in general, is the fact that even though you are doing your best to do as well as you can with your wallet, there are going to be compromises. One of the things that I said in that article about the Amazon boycott from last year, was it 2 years ago? It was last year. And the Amazon boycott that was a couple of months ago, where it's still the same issues, is that, wow, it hurts to say it, but you got to say it. It's not going to be a perfect science. Ethical consumerism is an art, not just doing, but being is what we talk about a lot at Lace on Race. Where if we get the who are you going to be down, what we are going to do comes a lot easier. That does not mean, that does not mean that it makes the questions any easier and makes the conclusions any more perfect. But it does mean that we are being mindful and intentional about the things that we choose, and that includes our dollars. Let's talk about this for a moment. Whether or not we go to Home Depot or a neighborhood hardware store or Lowe's or Amazon to buy a hammer makes a difference. Which difference is up to you and your personal values. But we don't want to put the cart before the horse. Before we decide which option to get, do you need and there are some people who would say, well, do you need a hammer at all? You can just use an old shoe and bang the nail into the wall. It's possible, but probably not optimal. While you're making these choices, we need to make sure that we're asking the right questions. As Padrago Tuomo would say, asking better questions before we get to the action. A lot of times, particularly when it comes to ethical consumerism, we go for the things that come up in our Facebook feed and we get nice and mad. We get so mad. Uh, Chick-fil-A is awful. And you're right. Chick-fil-A is awful in a lot of ways, particularly in their stance on LGBTQ+. But a lot of Chick-fil-A's are franchises. So the Chick-fil-A that's on Fletcher Parkway in La Mesa, the closest one to me, is one that is my ethical choice every time I drive past. Before I knew about the issues with Chick-fil-A, I was a Chick-fil-A fan. I actually liked the fact that they were closed on Sundays. I actually liked their sauces, and I loved. Uh, my endocrinologist, who manages my diabetes, does not love the fact that I love their sweet tea, but I loved their sweet tea. But now that I know what I know about Chick-fil-A, and I cannot unknow what I know about Chick-fil-A, this makes my choices harder because I have an unshakable belief in the rights of LGBTQ plus. That part of my decision is pretty much set. But then I think about the fact that it's a franchise. There are LGBTQ plus people who own Chick-fil-A franchises. And the people who populate, who work at the store on Fletcher Parkway in La Mesa may or may not share the values of Chick-fil-A, just like the people who work in Hobby Lobby may or may not share the values of their CEO. Hobby Lobby is another very notorious and infamous um, player that people have decided to boycott in favor of Joann's or Michael's or their neighborhood hobby or fabric store. But if we are going to make these decisions, if we are going to say, I am not going to Chick-fil-A, it is not enough to stop there. We need to look at the other options that we have and hold those options to the same scrutiny that we hold Chick-fil-A. Now we're talking about some homework. And a lot of times people don't want to do that. They'll just say, well, I won't do Chick-fil-A, so I'll go to Carl's Jr. Wait, Carl's Jr. has issues too. Well, okay, I won't go to Carl's Jr., but I'll go to KFC. Okay, hold on. KFC is part of Yum Brands, which has had their own issues, and right now is a peripheral player in the FritoLay slash PepsiCo strike. PepsiCo no longer technically owns KFC, Taco Bell, and there's one more, Pizza Hut, but they do have a stake in it. And so now we have to ask ourselves about that. If PepsiCo owns 15% of Yum Brands, which owns KFC, what's my ethical obligation there? Notice I am not telling you what to do. I'm not suggesting anything. If you decide after you do the steps required, and we're going to talk about the steps required, then I don't have a lot to say. What I care about is that you do it soup to nuts, that you don't just say, not Chick-fil-A, but anyone else. We do the same thing a lot of the time with the major dominant retailer in the United States and very possibly the world, which is Walmart. A lot of people refuse to darken the door of Walmart, and I completely get why. But they have no problem buying their toothpaste at Target, which isn't much better. The CEO of Target has said and done and financially supported some things that I am pretty sure that my viewership and my readership would take grand issue with, would take strong issue with, that I take strong issue with. Sometimes there are no good choices. If I were to live in a way that absolutely, completely aligned with my values, well, for one thing, I wouldn't buy very much at all. And that might be a good thing. But I cannot say not this, but that without knowing exactly what that is. That's important to know. It means you need to do your homework. And once you decide where you're going to go instead of, you need to own that choice. And even if, let's just say, Target over Walmart, Carl's Jr. over Chick-fil-A, Lowe's over Home Depot, you need to tell both of them. You need to tell both of them. One of the things that we were talking about were the 6 steps of integral action, which I'm going to pull up for myself so that we can talk about it for a moment, because I think it is so important that we are able to talk about it. Wow, this was a really long article. I still want you to read it, but it's a really long article. I'm still scrolling. Um, because I want to get to the 6 steps of integral action, and I want to make sure that I do not miss it at all. And now it made me click through. Oh my goodness. See more. Okay, here we go. The 6 parts of an integral act is these. And as I wrote in the essay from a year ago, I said this: boycotts are an act of integrity, and I absolutely believe that they are. But, or rather, and we need to be willing to go all the way with an integral act. That is one needs to have 6 elements in play, none omitted. Seeing what needs to be done, choosing to do it, with knowledge and with agency, to say that you'll do it, to take a public stand, to do the action, to say you did the action, and then crucially, to take whatever hit comes from it. Let's look at these elements one at a time, because I think that they are incredibly important to talk about and to really take a strong look at. Once we decided that we are going to boycott, that there is an action or a situation or an issue that demands um, affirmative action from us, we need to be willing to see what we see. So if we're willing to see what we see with Walmart, we need to be willing to see what we see with Target. And if not Target, then the neighborhood drugstore, the neighborhood boutique. We need to be able to hold their feet to the fire as much as we hold a major corporation. And that's really, really hard, particularly when we start talking about salaries, particularly when we start talking about hiring practices. Because as we pivot to race in this conversation, a lot of times the smaller businesses do not do as well as the larger businesses when it comes to hiring, promotion, and retention of Black and brown people. So it's not enough to just say that I'm going to go to the neighborhood chicken shack in your segregated neighborhood. You need to also be willing to have that conversation with the owner of the chicken shack about, I've been coming here for 10 years and I have yet to see a Black and brown face. What's going on? Then you need to say that you're going to do it. And you need to say it to all the players, to the people who you are going to be eschewing going forward. I won't do Walmart, but I'm going to write an email to Walmart on their Facebook page, wherever, saying, I am not going to spend my dollars here. And here's why. And this is a step that a lot of people don't take. It's not enough to just not go to Walmart. If I decided not to go to Walmart, at best, with my small consumer footprint, Walmart lost a few $100s a year. That's not even a rounding error for Walmart. But they do pay attention, even if they may not even acknowledge that you wrote the email. They do pay attention to correspondence. So if I email them, I'm not going to you, and here's why, someone's listening. And if enough people do it, then they're forced to really heed. Then I need to do the action. Or I need to be able to take all the steps in doing the action. That means saying the no to Walmart and saying yes to an option that truly is better. Then I need to say that I did the action, again, to both players. We already talked about Walmart. Let's just say that after I did it all things considered, Target is my best, not optimal, but my best option in the here and now. Then I need to tell Target. And I need to hold their feet to the fire too, because again, just like there's no such thing as ethical consumerism, there's no such thing as a perfect retailer. Then I need to take whatever hit that comes from it. It could be feeling that, oh, well, Walmart didn't answer me, so it didn't have an effect. It might mean um, having the tough conversations, and I did that. I've done this with my mother, having the tough conversations about why I'd really rather not go. My mother doesn't drive, so I, for a while there, would take her where she wanted to go. I'd make sure she was okay, and then I'd go back into the car. But I also have to think about the global reach. Now we're not just talking about applied ethics. Now we're also talking about relational ethics. A lot of my friends in my life, and I come from distinct working class stock, they are not going to be able to say no to Walmart and yes to Nordstrom. So I need to be willing to have these conversations, but with a huge heaping helping of grace And I also need to remember my relational obligations, my happy ethical obligations to them. It wasn't fair of me to just leave my mother alone in the Walmart. A lot of times, principled decisions can wind up leaving other people in the cold. And when we do these decisions, it's not just enough to get it right on paper. We need to have our praxis global and consistent and congruent. What is the point? What is the point of choosing to get my toothpaste at Target rather than Walmart, but making my mom feel crappy about going to Walmart? I'll tell you, that's not great. So we need to be able to talk about that. All of these elements need to be in play. We need to be aware of the relational. Now let's talk about the current boycott of FritoLay in Kansas. The workers there are indeed asking us to not buy FritoLay, not just in Kansas, but don't buy FritoLay. FritoLay is a division of PepsiCo, which means don't buy Pepsi. How long, you ask? As long as it takes. And that also means doing your homework. I'm old enough to remember the table grape boycott in the 70s. Cesar Chavez basically said, hey, no grapes, no grapes, no grapes. And it went on literally for years. And a lot of times people dropped out. It would be something to see. It would be something to see where there was no grapes anywhere. And what happened in my family too? No grapes anywhere. And then you'd start seeing grapes. The people that put grapes in tuna salad, some people do. I am not mad about that. They would put grapes in the tuna salad. I would notice that there would be grapes in my plastic bag in my lunch. This is during the 70s. Fast forward 40 years, we can say the same thing about Driscoll's, which is a behemoth grower in Southern California and also in Mexico. The specific boycott was on Driscoll's strawberries because of the atrocious, and I do mean atrocious, heinous, awful conditions in Mexico that the workers were enduring at the hands of Driscoll's growers. Makes for a sticky wicket. Like I said, I'm not a fan of Walmart. So, as much as I possibly can, I don't go to Walmart. I don't go to Sam's Club. One place that I do go and where I find I can live out my ethical consumerism the best is Costco. Costco used to be union, and some outlets are still union. In any case, they pay above standard. I am all the employees that I've ever spoken to have said that they are happy there, that the issues that you see in Walmart and Sam's Club are not extant in a Costco. Um, and that as much as possible they ethically source. One of the things that I used to say is, I don't get a great selection at Costco, but when I buy at Costco, I can feel good about my purchase. I can feel good about labor relations. I can feel good about how they site their stores. I can feel good about what I buy there. And then I saw Driscoll strawberries in the Costco in La Mesa. What to do? What to do? One thing I didn't do was I didn't buy strawberries, unfortunately, and it was high season for strawberries. Love me some strawberries. Couldn't get the Driscoll strawberries, but I couldn't let it end there. I needed to talk to someone about why Driscoll's is not in my cart. So I asked to talk to the produce manager. And the produce manager, the minute I started to say the, he knew where I was going with it. And he said, I totally feel you. I've heard about the boycott. I don't like that we're selling them either. But it's really hard to find strawberries these days. They are not our first choice as a supplier, but people want strawberries, so we're giving them strawberries. And then I had to think about it. Does this mean that Costco is now on the same no buy list as Walmart and Sam's Club? I decided that it is not. But it did not come quickly. I had, as I was driving home, I thought about it. I thought about the other choices that I had to buy my produce. I thought about neighborhood markets. I thought about smaller chains. I thought about farmers markets. And I actually understood the manager's position. And I understood that the manager did not make that decision and that he felt me. In the end, I decided to not buy the strawberries, but continue to go to Walmart. Again, again. There's no perfect ethical consumerism, but it is necessary to ask yourself, who am I going to be and how am I going to live in alignment, in congruence with the person I say I want to be? But first, it is absolutely necessary to determine the person you want to be. One of the things that helped me in this decision is that I knew I was not a person who would ever buy from Driscoll's. And that Driscoll's boycott has been going on for years. Not as long as the great boycott during the 70s and early 80s, but it's been going on a while. Oh, and by the way, another retailer that everyone thinks is a step up from Walmart, Trader Joe's and Aldi's, both sell Driscoll's. It's a big player. It's hard not to. And by the way, not only strawberries, but blackberries, blueberries, raspberries. Pick a berry. Driscoll's got their fingers in that pie. What then? And what about, I'm in my kitchen. What about jams? Driscoll's does not only sell direct to consumer, they also sell to manufacturers who make things like jam. Am I going to go and absolutely source every single blackberry that went in that jar of jam? The short answer is I am not. So I need to be willing to acknowledge to myself that despite my best efforts, I am not going to get it perfect. That does not absolve me from making my best effort. Are you with me on that? Are you picking up what I'm putting down? It's the same thing in terms of the racial justice sector, in terms of what I do with my dollars, if I am going to do anything with my dollars. We're going to talk about that in part 3, because part of ethical consumerism is how we, in a very crass way, and I hate putting it this way, how we consume social justice and racial justice, and how we apply the 6 elements of integral action to our racial justice walk. I hope I don't have to say this, but you know I love you. Stay tuned for part 3.